Hey, what's happening, everybody? Welcome to the program. It is it's almost May. It's going to be May here pretty soon. And this is the Jeff Gerstmann Show. Your home for all of the news and happenings in the world of video games. I'm your host for this week's installment of the program. My name is Jeff Gerstmann. I'm happy to be here. I'm here. We're ready to talk about totally awesome video games. And I don't know. Yeah. No, there's okay. On my list here, I've got one that's totally awesome and one that maybe is not as awesome. And then some news, I think is where we're at with stuff. After a couple of months of being kind of in the clear, as is just going to happen here. My daughter brought home a cold again, and she's better. She's back at school, but my son's got it, so he's upstairs. I'm watching him. He's up there hanging out, playing with some toys, relaxing. He's got a TV up there. That's one of those, like when they were getting sick back to back. We got some really shitty televisions for the kids' rooms, and parenting just is one of those. It's you tell yourself, you have all these things in your mind where you're just like, well, of course the kids aren't going to have TVs in their room until way later, and now here I am looking at a camera image of a 2-year-old boy with a television in his room, and I'm like, yeah, going good. And I don't know. So he's up there checking. I think what did we? I don't know what's on up there. It might be Blue's Clues. But he's on the mend. I don't know. He'll probably be up and around by tomorrow. It's hey, it happens. You know what else happens? Video games. I have been playing. I'm trying to decide which one to start with here. I have been playing a game called Mini Shoot Adventures. It's Mini Shoot with an apostrophe after it for some reason, like Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition had. So I don't know if you're supposed to pronounce that. Is it really Mini Shoot Dash Adventures, just like it's technically Street Fighter 2 Dash in Japan? I don't know. But Mini Shoot Adventures is on Steam. It's like $15. And it is a dual joystick shooter and also an interesting homage to the early games in the Legend of Zelda franchise. And so you're this tiny little ship, and it's a dual joystick shooter, and the ship rotates to shoot in whatever direction. And it's got a whole upgrade system. You're earning XP as you kill enemies, and you are upgrading your rate of fire and your damage and, your crit chance and, very shootery kind of upgrades. And then you are also going into dungeons and finding keys and finding boss keys and fighting bosses and finding heart containers and, finding cracks in the walls around the world that, look like, oh, do I get bombs later? And that is not the answer, but you do eventually find a way to get through those cracks in the walls. And so it's this big top-down overworld, original Legend of Zelda. Like, there's a screen very close to the beginning of the game that is the opening screen from the first Legend of Zelda, pretty much. The cave, the exit to the west, east, and north, like that. It is a very effective homage to those games. I like the way it looks. I think it's all ships, so it's all like little floaty little top-down views of these little spaceships and little hovering enemies and all of that, but they manage to make the ships kind of cute, and they do little spins, and they make little beepy noises at each other and try to generally be charming, and so it's a game with a lot of charm for a game that I think when you first maybe look at it, you're like, oh, it's just a bunch of like ships. Like, why isn't it, something more emotive like a person, or like something that can smile or frown or whatever. But like they get a lot out of their little ship designs and stuff, and it's a fun world to explore. You're finding map pieces to fill in the map in the overworld, and getting into all these caves and finding side quests, like little races against these little ferry ships, and finding tiny bugs that I don't even know what they're for yet, and getting currency that you can use to upgrade your main attack, and as well as the XP boosts that will you can use to boost it that way as well. And it's just a really fun, charming, I say little, but I've been playing it for a few hours now, and I don't actually know how long it is. I've beat 2 of what seems to be, it seems like there are 4 main dungeons that will then open up either a 5th dungeon or a final boss fight. I don't know what the extent of the end game is, but I have beat 2 of the 4 dungeons needed to open some kind of gate. And so there's huge parts of the overworld that I haven't even been to yet. And it's been really fun to explore. And it's been just a really fun thing to fire up for, an hour at the end of the night or whatever. Runs great on Steam Deck as well, though they are not fully playable because some of the text is small. And yes, some of the text is small. So if you're on the upgrade screen on a Steam Deck, you might be like, what the what? But they may very well they may be making a change along those lines. I'm not really sure, but it's been out since the beginning of the month, and it's $15, and I am having an absolutely wonderful time with it so far. So it is not it has 3 difficulty settings, and I'm playing it on the default kind of middle setting, and I'm saying it is not something I'm finding massively difficult. Like, I've died here and there. It's pretty forgiving with how it handles death and checkpointing and whatever else. But it has not been majorly difficult, but it's been difficult enough to where I'm not just like slopping my way through it either. There's an easier setting if you need that as well. But I don't know that I'm not like itching to go like, oh, I should set it to the hardest setting. Like, I'm not really looking for more intense combat, but like the boss fights go through a bunch of phases of bullet hell, bullet patterns, and you're kind of dodging in between that and dashing and boosting and so on and so forth. You have you get some decent mobility options here, but yes, mini shoot adventures. So far, it is fantastic. I am really, really enjoying it. So give that a look. I think there is a demo if you're so inclined, but do give that a look. It's pretty neat. The other thing is Stellar Blade, which is out on PlayStation 5, and I got access to the game, I think when most reviewers did, and sat down and tried to play it, and there was a lag and latency to the input. Like the time between you hitting the jump button and the on-screen character jumping was so delayed that it was like, what? And the attacks, and so it's a game where it has parries and parry windows and perfect dodges and all of this kind of timing based stuff that was like, this I literally cannot fucking deal with this. It is so bad. Like, the latency was so bad. And and when the review embargo was up, I kind of wrote something about that online. It's like, yeah, dude, it's like I've had nothing but trouble with it, to the point where I was like ripping cables apart and going like, well, I'll hook it up directly to the TV and do this, and like maybe it's my setup, maybe it's this, and checking the TV settings to make sure it's on the lowest latency settings possible, and realizing like, no, the PS5 UI is very snappy. When I hit the home button, it comes right up. Like, all of the other stuff coming out of the PlayStation 5 runs and looks fine. This game doesn't. And people wrote back and said, oh yeah, the demo had that problem too. I fixed it by disabling HDCP. It was like, what? Okay, really? That's a thing that can impact latency in a game? I've never heard of that before. And that was the last thing. There was also a patch for the game that was issued just before it went public, and it's better now. But since then, the developer of the game did an interview saying like, oh yeah, it's supposed to, yeah, no, we like the animation, so we made it so it, and to hear like the way they describe it, and so post patch it is better, I will say. But the choice they made in the game is to go for smooth animations rather than snappy ones. And so what they're saying is like, well, as soon as you hit block, she's technically blocking, but the animation takes a while to get up there. And I don't know that I fully agree with that. Like that there have been situations where I've been struck by an enemy and before the block looks like it's up and it has kind of snapped and then it'll snap into the blocking animation. And so there's this massive visual disconnect between the buttons you're pressing and the feedback you're receiving on screen. And again, it's a game where you were attempting to time parries and dodges, you know, so to step back a bit, Stellar Blade is a character action game with some Souls-like trappings around it, with some bonfire game aspects to it, where you are running through the world and doing your kind of combos a la, you know, sort of like a Devil May Cry, I would suppose. It is that type of fast action. And as you expand in the skill tree and stuff, you do have more abilities at your disposal. But also it is a game where you sit down and rest somewhere, and when you go to rest, you can level up. And when you go to rest, some enemies will respawn in the world. And so they're kind of bringing those things together in a way that is potentially really interesting. The feedback, the way the game looks and plays, and everything about trying to time your parries and everything about trying to time your dodges and trying to play the game and the attacking and everything about it feels awful. Even post-patch. Post-patch, it feels better. Post-patch, it's now a playable video game. I cannot deal with it. And so I'm like, every time I go back to it, I'm like, all right, yeah, let's get in here. And yeah, and I'm just the visual style. And the interview that the developer did said like, well, if there's enough feedback and people don't like it, we're open to changing it. I was like, well, all right. I don't think the game looks great enough to be warranting this like animation priority, especially in a game where you want to have these relatively tight windows for like how for parrying, for perfect dodges, for things that, you know, you want to see what you're doing on the screen. It's bananas to me that this is the direction they've taken with Stellar Blade. And so before any other aspect of the game comes into focus, I'm already like, I cannot with this. I will not with this. And so I have been really surprised by the positivity surrounding Stellar Blade at release, because I just look at that and go like, yeah, man, if you finish fixing this game, it'll probably be kind of cool. But right now, like, you have made a bunch of crazy choices about the animation in this game, and I got better stuff to do, man. Like, forget it. It's a shame. I think it's a nice looking game. I think the characters look really good. I think some of the enemy design is interesting. The world itself is kind of, you know, this torn apart place that, you know, looks okay. The storyline is relatively intriguing. But like, I don't, you know, like none of those aspects of the game are like amazing enough that I'm willing to like wade through this like molasses feel on the action itself, you know? And that's kind of to me, that's kind of the end of the Stellar Blade discussion, really. Like I have held off on playing it for significant lengths of time because I'm having a terrible time. I'm really having an unenjoyable time with it. It's just like, God, this is a miserable experience. And so if they end up making some changes to that and make it feel snappy the way it needs to feel to be that kind of game, then maybe, I don't know. I want to play dress up with the pretty ladies. That seems like it could be fun. You unlock suits, sure. I don't know, but like I don't want to deal with that. So that is Stellar Blade, and I'm curious to see what they end up doing because they did sound open to the idea of actually fixing the problem, but they were very, the I think it was the director of the game in an interview kind of saying, like, very much saying, oh yeah, we did that on purpose because we wanted the animation to look good. And I don't think the animation looks like so amazing that it's worth it. It's really a like bizarre choice to me. But beyond that, like, we were just talking recently about how no one makes games like this anymore. Or rather, I mean, a lot of people make games that are Souls-likes. A lot of people make character action games. But, like, Stellar Blade feels like this very run-of-the-mill forgettable game that came out every 4 to 6 weeks on the PlayStation 2. It's got that feel of it, where, like, someone sat down and said, what are the popular genres? Like a Devil May Cry thing? Oh, yeah, that's awesome. Oh, like a Dark Souls thing? Yeah, that's great. And they sat down and they cranked out one of those, and it's got this like workman-like quality to it, and you're like, this is neat. Sure, I'd play this. And so it ends up feeling like a game for right now, a game for when it comes out, you'll play it, and then you'll never think about it ever again. Until like 15 years later, you go like, oh yeah, I remember, they don't make games like that anymore. Much like I did with Alter Echo a few weeks ago, Like, it feels like it falls into that pocket really, really nicely. And I like that about it. But again, the gameplay, like the latency stuff is so nuts. Or the anime, I guess it's not latency stuff anymore because they seemingly did fix that. But the way that game moves and the way that game feels, it feels sluggish in the hand. It just, yeah. It needs to feel better than that if I am to spend what sounds like I believe it was Steven Totillo out there of Game File saying that he spent like 40 hours, like 39 hours and change with it. And I was like, okay, geez, that's a lot of this. I don't know that I want this much of that. And in it, even if it felt, even if it felt snappy, I'm not sure that I would be looking for that much Stellar Blade in my life. If this was like a 8 to 10, I'd be like, yeah, okay, sure, that's about right. But we'll see. I don't know. It's a game I want to spend more time with, but I will not until, unless some changes are made to that aspect of the game. Like I do not want to play any more of that. And that's a shame. That's a shame. I wish I had a better time with it. I was hoping for it. Because again, in all the trailers and everything, I was like, oh, this looks like a pretty nice game. And it had that kind of vibe coming out of it. It's like, all right, this weird, okay, Korean developer making this thing. That's great. You don't see a ton of games out of Korea, especially ones that look as nice as this. And you're like, okay, sure, man. Let's give it a go. But like, again, it feels bad. It feels real bad. So there you have it. You know what feels good? Mashing the 3 button. You know what feels real good? Watching a stream where someone is playing as Eddie Gordo in Tekken 8 and they are just mashing the left kick or button 3 over and over and over again. This has been going on for a handful of days now, and it is still running. It's Thor double in the chest. As things didn't change from Tekken 3, huh? No, they did, because in Tekken 3 you had to hit 3 and 4. In Tekken 8, You only need to hit 3. And Eddie Gordo, if you're not familiar with the fighting game Tekken, Eddie Gordo showed up in Tekken 3, and he's a capoeira fighter, which means he's doing his Bananawe shit, and he's doing up kicks and down kicks. He's all over the place. Like, his kicks are coming out from all these different angles, and if you're not used to seeing it, it can be very tricky to deal with. If you're not used to like that kind of bread and butter mashy combo, it can get you. And it can get you good. And you're like, oh, Eddie Gordo. And some people hated Eddie Gordo. A lot of casual players back in the Tekken 3 days were like, okay, well, it was one of two things. Like, either people could only play as Eddie Gordo because that was the only thing that they knew how to do, or they were forbidden from picking Eddie Gordo because he just his animation and everything, his flow felt so different from the other characters in the Tekken 3 roster. And so he's the first DLC character in Tekken 8. And then they buffed him at some point also in a patch. And so a Twitch account going by the name Jim Mashima, not Mishima, but Mashima, has been running a stream now, running what appears to be the PC version of Tekken 8. And it's just automatically mashing what would be the X button on a PlayStation controller over and over again. And it's in ranked matches. And so by mashing that button, it is automatically accepting the next match and connecting to the next player, and then mashing the button that does this kind of very generic, but again, somewhat tricky Eddie Gordo combo. And it's winning sometimes. And it's winning like more than it should, to be honest. Because Eddie Gordo can get you. That's the magic of Eddie Gordo. Someone in the chat says 32% win rate last checked. Yeah. So Eddie Gordo, made its way. The bot made its way up the ranks. It feels weird to even call it a bot. It's a turbo controller. Making its way up through kind of the first handful of ranks into like, what is it, like Destroyer or Vanquisher or something, like not super high, but every time every time the bot would brush up into a higher rank than that, it would always would lose and get knocked back down. So this has been happening for, it was all weekend. I think it was Friday when I saw this. I saw one Wayne Radio TV posting about this on Tumblr of all places. And again, if you know what to look for and figure out that it's just mashing that button over and over again, it's not that hard to beat it. You can sidestep here, you can do this, you can back off. And, if you have a good long range attack or something like that, you could knock it down that way. But you just need to get your foot and stick it in there in the middle of its combo and find out where the opening is. And so it is, yes, this like Twitch plays Pokemon style thing, except, well, Twitch isn't really playing, it's just mashing the button. But I feel like it is kind of a Twitch plays Pokemon-esque moment where people have really gravitated towards this and are like watching, have been watching for hours. Like I've been leaving it on most of the weekend and watching this fake character win matches or like suck them out at the last minute. You're like, oh man, like you see someone figure out like, oh, here's how you block this combo. But then they try to do something a little too flashy. They mistime it just enough. They get juggled for like a 4 or 5 hit combo. And then they end up losing a round and losing a match. And there've been a couple people rage quitting, which is hilarious to see. What do you think? I guess my question, do you think this is a good thing or a bad thing? I can't decide. I think it's a good thing for the culture because it's hilarious. I think it's maybe a bad thing. It doesn't necessarily speak well of Tekken. I am also surprised it hasn't been banned yet because, it is also, I think, ground out every single level on the Tekken Battle Pass by virtue of just running for 3 days straight. Um, this was, this was something that people complained about back in Tekken 3. And now that it's Tekken 8, but we're mashing the button 3, it's back all over again. And I went back and forth. Does this speak well of Tekken that like a bot mashing a button can win this many matches? Is that say something about the game? Does it say something about the people playing it? Like, what is it, and I at the end, I don't think I have any real answers to that. I think it's a little bit all over the place. I think there's the aspects of this that I look at and go like, it's kind of sucks that like you can just spam an attack like this and win and win 32% of your matches in ranked. I think that's kind of maybe that's a bad thing. But also, if you can't eventually pick up this combo and realize how to block it or realize how to get around it or how to stick your fist through it over the course of 3 rounds, you probably deserve to lose. Like, the people that are losing to this bot, it's not like some overpowered thing, I guess is my point. It's not like some amazing combo that you look at and go like, oh my God, it's too powerful for what it does. It's basically not even an auto combo, or it's such a generic attack that like once you look at it and you're like, okay, it's going to be high, low, or whatever it is. I don't have it memorized, but if it's 3 and then into 3 and then 3 again, and and then while standing you do a 3 and so it's interesting. I would be curious. I have to imagine by this point, this many days in, someone has probably smartened up Harada to it and been like, check this shit out. And they could have probably shut it down a billion times by now, but it's still running. So I don't know. It got me thinking about battle bots. It got me thinking about like, what if not quite a ghost mode, because the game will build ghosts based on how you play, and it will serve you can fight against other players' ghosts and everything else, and so you can there are ways for you to play against. There's ways for you to tailor AI in an image of the way you play. But I almost wonder, wouldn't it be neat if there was like a basic little programming language that you could use to script out AI for a fighting character and then put that character against someone else's scripted AI? Not something that's like looking at the screen with computer vision and reading combos and trying to react like a real AI would. I mean, just like kind of if-then statements or something, like, could you account for... but it's like something you manually program, not something that you program by playing the game, which would be complicated as hell. But I wonder if that would be fun in a battle bots kind of way, where you're kind of like building your own thing and taking it into the fight. Anyway, it is a fun watch. There's a couple thousand people in there pretty much at any given time, and so if you want to watch this go down, catch Jim Mashima, JIMMASHIMA, on Twitch while you can. Before something bad happens. What I'm saying is, join the Mashima Zaibatsu today. While you can, get in on this while it is still happening. Yes, there was another stream that was playing Victor and mashing the 2 button, which is a decent little combo for Victor. It's a little, that one would get stuck in the menus sometimes, I guess, but they were both running at the same time, and I wanted the 2 to meet, and maybe they did, but I never quite saw it happen. But it has been a wonderful happening. I'm curious to see if the Tekken team ever has anything to say about it one way or the other. Harada seems like the kind of guy that would probably say something along the lines of, yeah, if you can't beat a fucking Eddie player that's just mashing 3, then maybe you shouldn't be in ranked at all. You know, like I could very easily see that being the reaction out of them, just like, yeah, well, fucking get good. I don't know. But we'll see. We'll see what happens there. But that's been a really fun watch for the last few days. So get in on that while you can. Let's see. Okay, let's get into the news. Here, I'm gonna get into the news, but we're gonna crack this open here. I got this. My wife went to some fancy grocery store, and I ended up getting a can of this. It's called Gorgie. I don't think you can even read that. Gorgie. And it is Sparkling Paradise Punch. It says energy drink with benefits. I hate it. I hate everything. I hate everything about it already. The way that they're marketing. This is not, I guess, they're probably not marketing to me. I guess this is better. You know what? I would take this over the, like, we've got an American flag on the can and this is energy to keep America moving. Like, that's a way worse marketing tactic. It says sparkling, which usually means the flavor will not be very strong. But it does say Paradise Punch, and I do like a punch. So let's crack this open and find it out and figure out what the heck's going on. It doesn't smell like anything at all. No, wait. There's kind of it's just a generic, overly sweet, candy-ish, fruitish punch. Yeah, that's sort of a punch. I mean, that's what they're going for, is a punch flavor. This smells, I would call it delightful. I'm not sure what this is. I'm not sure what I'm drinking here. I don't. It just it tastes like bad water. The with a light kind of almost like a grapefruit. I mean, it does say Paradise Punch, not passion punch. Paradise Punch. Kind of a lingering aftertaste, but like a very nondescript. As Cannon Chop says, bathwater. Like, you know what? Kinda. Like it's this very faint flavor of, like, if it was some kind of soapy or like facial, like fancy soaps and scrubs that got weird flavors associated with them. It's vaguely, yeah. But not a strong flavor. Not a strong flavor at all. It's not great, but it's not actively terrible either. Let's get it on the list and we can move on to the news here. They announced all this Xbox stuff this morning, so like it's hard to have much of an opinion about this. It's like someone squeezed a couple of tropical like fruits into it, but not much and not enough. I like a stronger flavor with my energy drinks. I think, especially if we're trying to mask a large amount of caffeine and other chemicals, I think you want to have something that is a little overly flavorful, a little overly sweet in some cases. That can help as well. So instead you get that kind of vaguely bitter kind of aftertaste. It's better than Rat Bastard Blood Orange. That's for sure. It's better than Celsius Blue Crush. It's right in here with it. You know what? It's not as good as Zoa Fruit Punch, which was always kind of our Mendoza line, kind of like the bad drinks begin here. Like it's not as good as Zoa Fruit Punch, which was not a great drink, but I would drink it over a Battle Broth Energy Gamer flavor. Yuck. There was a bunch of flavors of Gorgie, but this was the one I decided to try. Sparkling Paradise Punch. And that is going to be our new number 123. You can go to energy.guard.bike if you ever want to see the full list of ranked energy drinks. You could do a lot better than this. You could do a lot better than Gorgie. Anyway, let's get on with the news. Xbox. Turn on. No? Xbox Games Showcase. They have announced that they are going to run their annual summer showcase on June 9th. That is right in the middle of Summer Games Fest, leading a lot of people who have been making appointments to see games in that window probably say, "Oh shit," today. I did not have any appointments in that time slot, so I'm okay. But yes, 10 a.m. Pacific time will be when this starts. I'll be sitting right here to stream it with you when the time comes. They are, the only thing they're saying is that they're going to air it on June 9th, and afterwards there will be a direct for an unannounced game, much like they did last year with the Starfield Direct. They are doing something. They are not saying what it is, but it is Call of Duty, based on the logo for the thing they are showing, and literally every report about this, everyone is saying that this is going to be a big Call of Duty showcase, which makes sense. So it will be very interesting to see how Microsoft, or if the way that Call of Duty information is rolled out changes it all under Microsoft. This is a different look for them. Typically, they've waited until a little later in the summer. Like, they've done their kind of like E3-ish announce thing, but then to really get into the nitty-gritty about the game, or they'd have like their live gameplay session where they bring in esports dudes to fucking esports it up. And then they all live stream that and go, "Look at that guy, snipe that guy in the face." And you look at it and go like, yeah, okay, I'm learning nothing about your game by watching esports broadcasts of it. This is like a bad way to show your game. Anyway, I'm curious to see what they end up doing with it. The rumors are that this is a Gulf War era game set in the Black Ops timeline, and the Treyarch is taking the reins on it. Okay. I think it's really funny. We've been making, I say we, but I mean we as a people, humanity has been making Call of Duty games for so many years now that we're wrapping back around from, like, when Modern Warfare came out in 2007, it was you know, a Middle Eastern conflict and all of that stuff set in a very modern warfare like setting where things were trying to be realistic, like movie realistic, but realistic. And now we've like the alternate timelines and all the other stuff they've come up with over the years have caught up to it to where now the fucking weird psyop mind control fucking insane sub brand of Call of Duty is basically right behind that one by doing an early 90s Gulf War game. It's they've been doing this a long time. But yeah, it's, you know, 07 is really, you know, yeah, it's yes, we've been, Call of Duty has existed for 20 years now. But Call of Duty as we know it today really started in 2007. People love those first 3 games, you know. It was like 2 and 3 came out on Xbox 360, right? Yeah, it was 2 was a launch game, and then 3 came out not long after that, and then, but 4 was really where it all clicked for them, and it suddenly became the biggest game in the world forever. Yeah, I don't know. Here we are again, standing on the precipice of another Call of Duty reveal. As Microsoft puts it, they say this will also be our first showcase featuring games from our portfolio of studios across Activision, Blizzard, Bethesda, and Xbox Game Studios, in addition to titles from our third-party partners. So yeah, you know, like this is, unless they go out and acquire something else, which in the near term is highly unlikely, that's the full brunt of Xbox. Like that is Xbox now. It's Activision, it's Blizzard, it's Bethesda, it's the existing Xbox game studios. And so I don't know what, you know what? I was going to say, I don't know what they would show from Bethesda, but it would clearly be the Starfield DLC, which they announced will be released this fall and is called Shattered Space. Shattered Space. Yeah. Starfield. Do you remember Starfield is it's like Fallout but in space? Remember okay, so the TV show Fallout, have you heard of it? They made video games based on that years ago. They based on like the, you know, I don't know, it was a board game. I don't know whatever Fallout was originally. It was a board game or just a t-shirt line, whatever it was. But you know, they used to make video games based on this thing Fallout before it was a TV show. And those games, you played them a certain type of way. It was like a first person thing, and you talk to people a lot. I don't know. Anyway, they made a game just last year that is similar to those. It doesn't have its own TV show, at least not yet, and it's called Starfield. And it's like a bad Fallout, or it's a good Fallout or a bad Fallout, depending on, I guess, what you liked about Fallout originally. The concept of Starfield DLC. And so yeah, Todd Howard was on I guess Greg Miller's Kind of Funny Stuff yesterday, and talked a little bit of like mentioned that this DLC was coming, and then also like all our console mod tools are coming, and we've got another patch that's going to hit the beta branch on Steam soon that's going to make some. And again, I just went through this whole process of like, man, they're still fixing Starfield. Does anyone, and no one is talking about Starfield. Starfield came and went. I who is, like, people finished Starfield. Modders, a lot of modders said, I'm not going to bother with Starfield. It's just a weird, you know, like, so this update, someone asked if it was going to have a map yet. This coming update will apparently add maps. So yeah, that's pretty cool. again, I finished Starfield. I don't like it. It did not seem like a world I wanted to spend more time in unless it was fundamentally changed to have more space in the space game, I guess. And I don't think a mod is gonna yeah, I don't know, whatever. Anyway, I'm curious to know what percentage of the Starfield players have already extremely moved on, especially when you think about just how popular all of the Fallout games have become again in the wake of the Fallout television show. It's been really fascinating. And so that next generation patch for Fallout 4 came out. It sounded like some people had some problems with that, and that didn't necessarily fix some issues. It broke a bunch of mods, which of course it would, and whatever. But the reaction to that was kind of mixed in terms of some people were like, oh, it looks fantastic. And I saw some people very frustrated, like, oh, it still crashes just as much, if not more so. This is still completely broken. Either way, I have fallen into some kind of TikTok hole lately where a full third of the videos I see on TikTok are videos of people playing Fallout 4 and suddenly doing all of these tips for Fallout 4 because it's hot right now. And so it's like, did you know if you don't talk to the guy that comes to your door and you go do this and you do like just like really inane tips for playing Fallout 4 because people are playing Fallout 4 again. It's really fascinating to see that game have that kind of resurgence in the wake of the television show. Also, they put the games on sale, and of course, I believe they're all on Game Pass. I've also seen a lot of Fallout New Vegas, which it sounds like that game is still crash prone, depending on what you're doing to it. These days, that it never really truly got ironed out. I don't know. There's like stuff about the world in Fallout 4 and the act of playing Fallout 4 that I did enjoy when it was running properly, but that was a game I played at launch. Much like, it's the thing about reviewing a lot of games, right? Is you're playing them you're playing them at launch. And so Bethesda games don't launch well. They haven't launched well. I'd say Starfield was actually probably their best, smoothest, cleanest launch to date. Especially compared to, again, like I played Fallout 4 on a PlayStation 4, and there's a scene in that game where you go up to a blimp. I forget what faction, like I've lost track of who is who or whatever, but like I had agitated all of the people standing on the deck of that blimp. And because they were all running at me and trying to kill me all at the same time, the frame rate dropped to probably below 1 frame per second in spots. And so I had to go and get basically every stealth boy I could find and more or less just kind of turn myself invisible and try to stealth my way past all of these agitated running dudes to get inside a smaller area where the frame rate would then recover, and then I could open the door and just shoot them all as they ran in. Or I forget how I ended up dealing with the problem once I got on there, but like I had to sneak past, like I had to stealth my way past the part where the frame rate was unplayably slow because there was no way to get in a gunfight with any of those guys with how broken it was. That was probably the single most egregious thing that happened in my launch era playthrough of Fallout 4. There was other stuff where quests completely broke because a door wouldn't open, and there was a bunch of things along the way, but that was like a pretty late game thing in the grand scheme that I was like, I don't know that I can play this anymore. Like this is, and so I had to like trick my way through it. It was so annoying. It was so frustrating. And they added all that base building and stuff that I don't want to do. I don't want to have someone run up to me and be like, there's action at the base. And like, I don't care. I'm a lone man in the wilderness. I don't even want a companion most of the time, let alone a base of people relying on me. Fuck them. Go die. Go stand in radiated water. I'll build a base in radiated water. No humans. No humans left. And no mutants allowed while we're at it. Yeah, whatever. Anyway, it's been interesting to see that game have a resurgence. And after all these patches and stuff, it certainly seems like it, runs, well, whatever. It always ran better on PC than it did on PS4. I don't know what that game runs like on. I don't know where they ended up with it on PS4 by the time they were done patching it. But that performance problem was, at the time, one of the worst things I had seen in a shipping game. Like a major, here's a major release from a well-established franchise and, that has had previous success. Like, they're not like bootstrapping this, like, oh, we had to cut some corners to save some money. Like, it's the next Fallout from the people that made this, from the people that made Skyrim, the people that made Oblivion, from the people, like, they were already out of, yeah, anyway. That said, I would love to see, the popularity of Fallout. I would like to see a new game set in the Fallout universe sooner rather than later. And I think that one of the nice things that's being floated right now is this idea of like, well, the Bethesda Game Studios team is working on the next Elder Scrolls game, so they're not going to get to Fallout for a really long time. And so people are starting to say, like, boy, wouldn't it be cool if someone other than Bethesda Game Studios made a Fallout game? To which I say, absolutely. Let's see what that looks like. Let's see what a different team. But, at the end of the day, I'm sure that team would certainly contribute to it. But yeah, sure. Microsoft owns Obsidian. They could get back together. They could make a New Vegas 2 and explain why New Vegas blew up. If they wanted to do that and tie that into the TV show or something, if they really wanted to. I want one of those games to work better than they have. And Starfield was pretty close. The bugs I experienced along the way in Starfield were relatively minor compared to the stuff that happened in Fallout 4. But yeah, I don't know. There is a story from, sorry, I'm a little stuffy today. There is a story from Tom Warren over on The Verge, and he is trying to kind of plug some game names into this summer showcase event. And so he is on the record as saying that the direct thing afterwards is indeed Call of Duty. He also says this will be where Microsoft, he says, I understand Microsoft is currently planning to announce a new Gears of War game during the show. The showcase will also feature a number of release dates for upcoming games like Flight Simulator 2024, Avowed, and Indiana Jones. We're likely to get a date on the Starfield expansion. I understand Bethesda is currently, so he's got some months at least for some of this stuff. He says that the Starfield expansion is targeting September, Call of Duty for late October, which lines up, Avowed and Flight Sim in November, and Indiana Jones in December. Gears would almost definitely not be out this year if they're just going to announce it here. But yeah, it says he ends it by saying Microsoft is supposed to have a lot of games to show this year, more than the 2023 showcase. We should expect to hear how the 2025 lineup is looking, with some launch dates for some anticipated Xbox games. I don't like, what are some anticipated Xbox games at this point? I mean, Gears would be. Perfect Dark, perhaps. Fable. This would maybe be, I wonder. I was going to say this might be the right time for them to say, hey, Forza Horizon is back, and announce Forza Horizon 6. just to kind of keep that rolling and keep people focused on something new in a world where Forza Motorsport is perhaps not getting the job done. I could see them maybe having a very brief teaser on that if they have anything in the works there. Blizzard's on this list. Is that just like, here's the next WoW expansion and here's the next Overwatch hero? Oh, I guess they've got the Diablo. So BlizzCon has been canceled. They've said that they are planning to bring BlizzCon back in the future, but there is not going to be a BlizzCon this year. So perhaps this is a time for them to show the Diablo expansion, which they already have been on the record as you know, it exists or whatever. I think they've already announced it, but like that's a Blizzard thing that they could probably show there. And the rest of those, I mean, ongoing games like that, like, you know, Bethesda would always devote a little bit of time to Fallout 76 and to Elder Scrolls Online, right? So I feel like World of Warcraft and probably Overwatch fall into a very similar cadence with that stuff, where like, yeah, you probably announce a thing there, but you're not going to spend a ton of time on it in your showcase, because you're kind of preaching to a choir with those, and there's really not that much. Yeah, does Bethesda show any of the new Elder Scrolls here? I suppose anything is possible at this point, you know, depending on what they want to show, right? Do they want to show something that's extremely early? Do they want to, you know, like, if they just wanted to show a logo and a game name and a mountain, and does the mountain have snow on it or not? What region it's gonna, you know, like what region is this mountain in? Whatever, you know, they could do that for the next Elder Scrolls. Just a brief tease, nothing that's like, you know, it's not like some 5-minute gameplay demo or anything crazy like that. But I could very easily see them doing something very small, to just kind of advance the information on Elder Scrolls and just remind people like, hey, this is what we're working on. It's not Fallout, and also it's set here or whatever. Like, I could very easily see them doing that. And then yeah, they'll have some third-party stuff. We'll see what that ends up being. I don't know. I'm really, you know, like I'm not necessarily down on big studio video games right now, but it's been weird. It's been a weird chunk of time for them. I think the past, you know, 6 months, well, the past, yeah, I mean, like this calendar year. And when we think about what the big publishers have been doing lately, which is mostly laying people off and delaying games and whatever else, and like things just feel very weird right now. And so I don't know. I'm not saying like, oh, we should write off 2024, but like, you know, 2023 had some pretty fucking amazing video games. And also then it felt like in some ways the bottom dropped out of the release cycle, where like, okay, these were the games we were able to get done during the pandemic, but those fucking broke us, and so there's not a lot left in the fucking chamber, and holy shit, the economy changed and all of this and that and blah blah blah, you know, and so, you know, like it's we kind of fall back to the like, hey, things are still pretty rough out there, and what does that mean going forward, or what does that mean in terms of like the quality or the and by quality, I mean, quality of an announcement is a weird thing to talk about. I'm not talking about the quality of the final product, obviously, but I'm saying like, is it big sequels that are getting people excited? Is it big new IP that people are going like, oh my God, I can't believe they're working on this, or you know, like what is there? You know, do we see like Kojima's Xbox game here? That might make sense. You know, and if Sony does something in this same time frame, maybe they show Death Stranding too, and you know, if they're working on both in the same at the same time, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, do we see anything out of id? Yeah, Jay Forsberger says Quake 5. Yeah, do you, what is id up to? It sounds, well, yeah, so what is id up to? That'll be June, so that'll be a little bit before QuakeCon, which is always so that's the other thing, is like you could have a situation where they don't have id and they save some Bethesda stuff for QuakeCon, and then they announce that in August or whenever QuakeCon is these days. But I would think you would want, I guess I feel like Microsoft needs a show of force here. Like, so there's been some other stories about the third quarter earnings report from Microsoft. Kotaku's headline is Xbox console sales are tanking, which is, I would say, dramatic, though also not wrong. Console sales are down 30% year over year, which is kind of the same thing they said last year, according to Kotaku. So, yeah, that's not great. They're not helping their case, you know. Like, what are the great reasons to buy an Xbox right now? If you were in the marketplace looking to buy a video game console, it's Game Pass, right? I mean, I feel like Microsoft has not necessarily made good on shipping their own games. And so if you were looking at differentiators between the Xbox and the PlayStation, if you're out there in the market making that decision, it is all Game Pass. And that's kind of it, you know, and that's not nothing. That's powerful. But if you're also looking at a PlayStation 5 and then you go like, well, what's PlayStation 5 got? They can at least tangibly say like, hey man, check out this Spider-Man game. It looks pretty awesome, right? And you're like, hey, we got this, you know, Horizon looks good. And, you know, some of those are cross-platform games, but like, they do look noticeably better on a PS5, I suppose. But you know, I guess my point is like, if you're in the market right now and you haven't made that decision yet, and you are kind of in play for what console you get, I don't know that they've done an amazing job of making you need an Xbox Series X. So I don't know, like that's. It does. What I'm saying is, it's not surprising that the Xbox console sales have not been burning up the fucking charts, considering everything we have been hearing about Xbox's fortunes as well as their strategy over the past year or whatever it's been now. Even out of the, you know, the CEO, even out of the head of Microsoft, he's saying. I'm looking for the quote here. So this is, so Video Games Chronicle has a kind of a wrap up of the quarterly of their quarterly as well. We've been encouraged by the ongoing success of Call of Duty's Modern Warfare 3, which is attracting new gamers and retaining franchise loyalists. Okay. Diablo 4 was played over 10 million hours in the first 10 days, making it one of the biggest first-party Game Pass launches ever. And also, Nadella said, at one point this month, it had 7 games among the top 25 sellers on the PlayStation Store, which was more than any other publisher. So, you know, like, you're looking at the metrics that they're touting as like, well, okay, yeah, hardware sales are in a tough spot, but also we're selling more PlayStation games than any other third-party publisher. Okay. Like, that's cool. I mean, that's not nothing. You know, like, hey. And so they're trying to, they're trying to piece together what day, because, you know, Sony's charts update daily. And Video Games Chronicles pulled it together, said April 18th was Modern Warfare 3 at number 2, Overwatch 2 at number 7, Sea of Thieves at number 12, Fallout 4 at 16, Minecraft at 19, Fallout 76 at 20, and Grounded at number 23. That's more games in the top 25 than Sony had, which Sony published games on that day were MLB The Show, Destiny 2, Helldivers 2, Stellar Blade, and Rise of the Ronin. So, yeah. It's clear that Microsoft is interested in finding success wherever they can find it. The quote from Nadella last week is that I think is noteworthy. Is we are committed to meeting players where they are by bringing great games to more people on more devices. So that sounds like a pretty fierce endorsement of their multi-platform path from the head of the company, and it seems to be working for them if they are able to tout those numbers in the context of their annual call, but also of their quarterly, but they're also using it probably to kind of jingle some keys over here as the hardware story starts to erode over here, and so it gets you thinking about when is Microsoft going to pull the trigger on a next generation? Are they going to try to do it early? Because if no one's buying an Xbox, then they don't really have a ton of reasons to continue that platform. If they've got their idea, if the technology is there now and they can get it going and make them, they could try to jumpstart the next generation a little early. But also, again, what changes about that console that makes that console more desirable than the one they have out now? So, from a power perspective, they're currently pretty neck and neck with the PlayStation 5. It's not the differences are not meaningful in a wide, in a mainstream sense. And they're just kind of getting trounced from the sounds of things. So I don't know. It's interesting, but I do think that if you look at this and if they are seeing actual success of when it comes to bringing those games to PlayStation, they will keep doing it. And this was always the thing, right? They're, when they talk about games, they talk about, well, there's nothing to announce today, and they were very careful when they announced the first batch of multi-platform games that they were doing recently. It's not the first batch, but the most recent batch, I suppose, is the right way to phrase that. But Starfield will eventually come to a PlayStation console, I think is the upshot here. Not that that's the end all be all, oh my God, they're throwing in the towel if Starfield is coming, but if they're able to see more success on a business level by doing that, then they will do that. And that's how it's always been. And that's how it, I think that's the wiggle room they left themselves when they started talking about some of those other games coming over to other platforms. It very much was hey, yeah, we'll kind of play it by ear. We're nothing to announce today, but these games are all over a year old, and these games are this and these games are that. And if they're able to sell a lot of copies, or if they're able to sell so many copies of Sea of Thieves that it cracks into the top rankings, and Sea of Thieves is years old. Okay. Maybe that's the strategy to maintain. Maybe that's a strategy that lets them keep some advantages for their own hardware and for their kind of their home base of Xbox console players, while still eventually selling them down the line. Game Pass is a very attractive offer, a very attractive way to play some of those games. When Call of Duty comes out, and we'll see what Call of Duty looks like on Game Pass and what the benefits are there. If it is merely just you own the game now, or if it's more hey, and you're also going to get X, Y, and Z over the course of the year. You're going to get double this, double that, and here's some extra dudes and some skin packs and whatever else. Maybe that's a meaningful shift for for Call of Duty, which I think even in the era where Call of Duty was doing a lot of PlayStation exclusives through the PS4, it still resonated mostly as an Xbox franchise. I think it's a little murkier now that they do all the cross-platform, cross-play, everything, but yeah. Nintendo is going to make a new Nintendo Switch. I know. I'm shocked as well. We have some details, some sketchy details. But details from a third-party controller manufacturer known as MobaPad. And this is normally the sort of thing that you would want to dismiss out of hand because, like, who the fuck is this and why are they credible? But at the same time, I feel like every good Apple leak starts from a case manufacturer. Like some third-party company that makes cases for the iPhone is like, oh yeah, here's what the next iPhone is. We know because we had to bribe someone so that we could make our cases faster. And so this company that makes, let's look at their products page real quick here. They make some Joy-Cons and they make some Switch-compatible controllers and a Switch carrying case, among other things. They've just got a page up and they're just like, well, I mean, we, like everyone else, are eagerly anticipating accurate information about the Switch 2. In the process of developing the next generation console controller, MobaPad has also acquired a lot of first-hand information about the Switch 2, and now we're here to share it with everyone. So you kind of have to take this with a grain of salt, but also there's a certain weird credibility that Chinese manufacturers kind of end up with sometimes when it comes to leaks like this. So we're getting close enough now that some of this stuff eventually has to stick. We'll see. They've got a 6-point plan, or a six bullet points. The Switch 2 will continue to support existing Joy-Cons and the Pro Controller, still equipped with the Alps dual-axis linear motors for HD rumble. Which is a sentence that a controller manufacturer would very much write. The cartridge slot of the Switch 2 will support backwards compatibility with physical Switch game cartridges, ensuring compatibility with players' existing game libraries, including digital versions. However, the second-generation cartridges may not be compatible with the first-generation console. Okay, so backwards compatibility, both for cartridges and for digital, is what they're saying there. The new version of Joy-Con has a larger volume, and the sliding rail structure has been changed to magnetic suction. The SL and SR buttons are metal buttons. Magnetic suction is achieved through electromagnetic suction technology. Electromagnetic suction technology. Controlled by electric current. It's worth noting that in addition to the L, ZL, R, and ZR buttons on the sides of the Joy-Con controller, a third button has been added on both the left and right sides. Ooh. And a mysterious third button. Additionally, below the home button on the right Joy-Con, there is an additional function button. Oh, shit. That turns on the 3D screens and the VR, right? Yeah. Oh, no. So the magnetic suction thing, that is, I have heard of this, and the Video Games Chronicle kind of recapped this story a little bit and did a little bit more digging into the what magnetic suction might mean here. And they're referring to something called electropermanent magnet technology, which is sort of like you can, and this is interesting stuff that I don't know that I've seen in the wild before. I'm sure it's out there. It's just, but it is basically you can send a pulse of electricity to a magnet to turn it on and another pulse to turn it off. And so it's a low power solution. It's not an electromagnet that is constantly draining your battery, which is crucial for a handheld device, but it's something that could be significantly stronger than the rails used on the existing Switch. If that is indeed the route that they're going for latching the new Joy-Cons to the side of the Switch. And as far as the old Joy-Cons, what they're basically saying is that you can use the old Joy-Cons, but you cannot dock them to the side of the system because it doesn't have rails. It's more like you could tether them to the system to play multiplayer games. If that was something where you that you wanted to do. Number 4, the bottom of the Switch 2 will still feature a USB-C port for docking. And the new generation dock will undergo minor changes in appearance while enhancing performance, supporting 4K resolution. That sounds like power in the dock. That sounds like that they would put an upscaler in the dock itself is kind of what that sounds like to me. But it could just be that, like, hey, when it's powered up, it can render better and run at higher clock speeds and whatever else. So it may not be, but we'll see. Number 5, the new dock will feature a damping bracket on the back, allowing for a greater range of adjustable angles. Hooray. And number 6, the screen will be upgraded to an 8-inch display supporting 1080p resolution. From a hardware perspective, the Switch 2 inherits the dual mode feature of its predecessor, continuing Nintendo's conservative approach to hardware. We have every reason to believe that Nintendo will bring more innovative gameplay to the Switch 2 as seen into the advancements in the controller design. For example, what functions will the third button on the side of the controller serve? What special features will the additional button below the home button offer? There is much room for imagination, and while we don't know yet, there are certainly new features and gameplay innovations to anticipate. Okay. Yeah, that button could just be the thing that lets you detach the controllers. Yeah, I mean, yeah, sure. Or the putting third buttons on the controllers could just be them getting into the back button market of like, hey, we got 2 shoulder buttons and we got a couple of buttons back here for people that want to, have back buttons like true sickos. That doesn't necessarily sound like massive gameplay innovations to me, but hey, man, 2 more buttons? Sure, fuck it. Put the buttons on the face. Put 6 buttons on the face of the controller for fighting games. How about we do that? Why don't we do that? Why don't we just do that? What if we just did that? Wouldn't that be cool? 6 on the face. Like 3 on the tree, but better. Anyway. So that is the basis of this report, and that's been the report that's been going around here. In addition to this, you may remember that there was discussion that screen on the new Switch was not going to be an OLED screen, that it was going to be LCD in order to, make sure that they can make enough of them to meet demand and whatever else. The thing that is giving me pause about all of this, or the thing that sticks out rather, is a lot of the discussion around the relatively conservative approach to hardware. And the idea of just like, well, it's a 1080p screen here, and then, yeah, it's 4K if you're plugged in, and if Nintendo takes okay, I guess to put this another way, is the Switch 2 the thing that people were talking about when they were talking about the Switch Pro? When we were talking about a half-step Switch console, when we were talking about like, oh, it's kind of a decent little step up, and yeah, it's a little bit more powerful, and yeah, it's got a little bit more juice in it, but it's not some knockdown, drag out thing. Is that the thing they're just making? Now, let me ask you this. Do you think that Nintendo going out there and trying to shut down a lot of the emulators for the existing Switch do you think that that is all at all related to the timing of them unveiling a follow-up to the Switch that also won't run Switch games as well as they ran on a PC? A certain amount of like, okay, we need to shut down development of this for a handful of reasons, really. But also, if we're about to start showing what our new, more powerful console looks like, we're sick of these comparisons. We're done with this bullshit. Shut these fuck ups down. Maybe that's a stretch. But it leaves me wondering, what will these games look like when they are running on the new Switch? If we truly got backwards compatibility and so on and so forth, what is that going to translate to in terms of how does that look on a screen, especially when you've blown it up to 4K, if you can indeed do that with these games, via, you know, some sort of DLSS like technology. Like, how does, you know, does the DLSS like technology only live in the dock because the screen on it only renders at 1080p anyway, so you don't really need it there? Do they put kind of half a GPU in the dock, or do they just not need to do that, and it's all inside the Switch and they just clock it up as needed? Does that get hot? It seems like it would get hot. A lot of questions, but yeah, I don't. All of the recent Switch 2 talk, I guess I would say, has left me a little cold in terms of when it comes to excitement about the thing. But like at the end of the day, you know, who cares? Like at the end of the day, the how powerful is the Nintendo Switch has become the least interesting conversation point about it. Because at the end of the day, all that really matters is how do the first party games look on it. And if you're a Pokemon fan, you're probably saying they look pretty fucking bad depending on what you're doing. And so you're probably pretty excited to get some more power thrown at those games, even those existing ones, if they can take advantage of it. But certainly going forward, you would hope that some of the frame rates that we're seeing in some of those modes in those Pokemon games end up becoming a thing of the past. But yeah, I don't know. It's a lot up in the air on that thing, you know, and we'll have to just wait and see where all that lands. But interesting times. Square is also on the interesting times train. They issued a notification of recognition of extraordinary losses, which sounds like a truck got stolen, but it's worse. This is a note that they just this is a notification that they just issued today, but it is born out of a meeting held by the board of directors back at the end of March, so about a month ago. Nature of the extraordinary losses. At the meeting convened on March 27th, the board of directors of Square Enix Holdings Company Limited, the company, voted, in light of the myriad changes underway in the environment surrounding its group, to revise the group's approach to the development of high-definition, HD, games, with the intention of being more selective and focused in the allocation of development resources. As a result of a close examination of the group's development pipeline undertaken in keeping with this revised approach, the company expects to recognize approximately 22.1 billion yen in content abandonment losses on its books for the fiscal year that ended in March. Content abandonment losses is a really cool phrase. It's right up there with nature of the extraordinary losses and notification of recognition of extraordinary losses. This comes from a document that Square has posted on its own investor relations site in English. The company is carefully reviewing its consolidated forecast for the fiscal year ended March 2024 to assess the potential for impact from the above or other factors. Should revisions to its forecast prove necessary, the company will promptly disclose the same. So what that sounds like is that they're canceling games. It sounds like a big reassessment of their pipeline, of how they make games, why they make games, whatever else. We don't have any details on how many projects may have been canceled, if it was stuff that had been announced or not. I would imagine if you are working on season 7 Foam Stars content, you might not finish it. You might not be finishing that. Yes, clearly Final Fantasy 7, the 3rd chapter, clearly they canceled that. No, I don't know. They 22.1 billion yen is God, how much is that? That is $141 million or thereabouts. Video Games Chronicle points out that earlier this year, Square Enix decided to conduct a fundamental review of its development process. That was according to Bloomberg originally. And this is in the wake of them appointing a new president, Takashi Kiryu. And back in February, he said, "We are reviewing from scratch what the organizational structure is and what the best way is to implement the contents of the pipeline." So this seems like kind of the next step in that process, where they have evaluated the pipeline, looked at what's selling, what isn't, what they have in the works, and maybe saying like, hey, like we are canceling $140 million worth of games, which seems like a lot of games. Games are too expensive. Games are too expensive to make. Like I guess like that's my takeaway from this is like, hey, it probably just costs too much to make this stuff. If the havoc that is being wreaked across multiple publishers right now, yeah, I don't. Like I said, I just there's just a weird. There continues to be just a kind of bad feeling about games out of major publishers and what's happening at all of the major publishers these days. Not to say that smaller publishers and indie publishers are having an amazing time either, but like that feeling that things are untenable, or maybe if they are tenable, that people at the top are not willing to take those kinds of risks anymore, and so they're just cutting ties anyway on things that might have made money, feels weird. The FTC has fined Razer to the tune of, let's see here, there was two chunks of money here, but over $1 million in fines. Remember, Razer decided that they were going to make a COVID mask? Remember when Razer said that they were going to make an RGB fucking mask that you could wear, and that at some point they were like, yeah, it's like an N95. And they eventually did sell the mask. They represented it as if it was N95 certified. It was not. And so the Federal Trade Commission was like, what the fuck? You can't fucking do that. Especially in a goddamn pandemic. They called it the Zephyr mask. It had replaceable filters, and this is according to Kotaku.com. So it was never certified to be an N95 mask. And as people got their hands on it, it was apparently pretty easy to see that it was not certified. And they did represent it as such, but they did stop marketing it as N95 certified, but a little too late for the government, who yesterday posted a press release, Razer Inc. to pay more than $1.1 million for misrepresenting the performance and efficacy of supposed N95 grade Zephyr face masks. Case continues agency's efforts to combat COVID-related health product scams. You know, if the government is calling a thing you're doing a scam, you're probably not in a great spot, Razer. So they did, so I'm reading the government's press release about this. These businesses falsely claimed in the middle of a global pandemic that their face mask was the equivalent of an N95 certified respirator. The FTC will continue to hold accountable businesses that use false and unsubstantiated claims to target consumers who are making decisions about their health and safety. Now, just imagine when they were doing this. You know, this is October 2021 is when they began selling it. I mean, there are plenty of people still wearing masks now. But 2021, it's kind of prime mask time. And the idea of people having fancy masks or masks with replaceable filters, which is how they sold it, as like, oh, you could get 10 extra filters for $30. Might sound attractive. However, these masks were not up to snuff. And so, that's the money breakdown is $100,000 civil penalty against the defendants, and also $1,071,254.33, which is equal to Razer's revenue from the masks, which the FTC expects to use to provide refunds to defrauded customers. This amount will allow the FTC to provide full refunds to customers who purchased the deceptively marketed product. So if you bought the Razer COVID mask, which I won't fault you for, because that's a kind of dumb, that if that mask was actually viable and and certified and whatever else, I would have been like, yeah, fuck it, man. Let's buy fancy dumb masks that make us look like sick fucking neon ninjas. I get it. Let's use Razer Synapse to fucking, I bet you had to install Synapse to fucking change the lights on the mask too, right? Of course you did. Because they'll do anything to get you to install fucking Synapse on a goddamn PC. But that software, there are some Razer products out there that I think are actually pretty good. But unfortunately, you have to fucking install Synapse. And Synapse is fucking dog shit. Anyway. That's real dumb. I don't know that I have much more to say about it other than that's real fucking dumb. That's a real they did it to themselves on that one. But yes, Razer never even submitted the mask for approval. So they never got permission to use the N95 term in marketing. They never had the approval. They never had, so they never even tried to certify it. It's not that it failed. They probably realized it was never going to pass and went like, no, or they realized, hey, we don't want to take on the liability. Oh, geez, but that's almost worse. That's almost worse liability. Like, I wonder, are there any examples, and hey, probably, well, who knows? I was saying, are there any examples of people that purchased one of these masks and then got COVID? Because that's probably the lawsuit right there. That's probably the banger. Like, whoops. The thing we sold you to, oh geez. Yeah, I guess we did say that it was going to be good. I guess we did say it was going to be up to standards for this sort of stuff. Whoops. Not great. Not great. That's it for the news. Why don't we get into some emails right about now? I was looking for an email button. I still don't have one. Podcast@guard.bike is the email address. Send in your emails to me, and then I will, read them and so on, and we'll take a look at them. Much like Maximiliano, who wrote in and said, now that the current PlayStation 5 is basically old garbage, will there be a new Astro's Playroom set in a post-apocalyptic, obsolete PlayStation 5? Will all the Astrobots need to be rescued and placed in better hardware? I would love for there to be DLC for Astro's Playroom. That's like, here's the PS5 Pro add-on, where there's a whole new ray tracing world or something. That would be very silly. Cody in Orange County writes in and says, quick question about your LG OLED monitor. Amazon had it on sale for $600 and I'm considering the purchase. To my recollection, you got one roughly a year ago. How are you feeling about it? Any little quirks or burn-in that you've noticed? I bought one of these LG OLEDs. It's 240 hertz. It's 1440p. It's everything I ever wanted out of a monitor. And it's fantastic. It's the only little things about it are that's with a couple of games I had it completely shut down. Tekken 8 was one of them a couple of times back when Tekken 8 first launched, but I have not had a problem with Tekken 8 since. It happened recently when I was turning HDR. Like when I was doing the NES stream last week, I turned HDR off, and when I turned it back on, the monitor went dark and I had to unplug it and plug it back in. And so that's a weird thing that has happened with, I think, 3 things. Tekken 8, there was another game that I can't remember what it is now, and now this weird HDR thing I was doing. But that's been pretty few and far between, and that's kind of really been the only big issue, I guess. So that's pretty minor. The other thing that occasionally happens is like you'll be on a loading screen for a game, and it's nice OLED dark blacks and whatever else, but then as it's loading, like the black level kind of pops back and forth a little bit, like it goes gray while it's loading or something, almost like a disk drive light. There's a little flicker on that. It doesn't really happen when you're running games. It usually happens on static screens. And so it seems like that's a static, maybe that's something where it's trying to, one of the things they're trying to do to mitigate burn-in or whatever else. I don't really know if it's just related to that or something, but yeah, that'll happen on loading screens and stuff like that. It's a little weird. Someone in chat is saying that's VRR flicker. Okay, that could vary. Okay, that maybe that's just related to VRR then. I have not had any trouble with burn-in whatsoever. The monitor does have a built-in, like, it shuts off if it doesn't detect any movement on your screen for a pretty low, like it's almost kicked on a couple of times during the podcast. And it's a very short low number that I don't think you have any. I don't think you can turn that off. If you can, I have not found it. Maybe it's in some operator settings somewhere. So if you have like a video, like if I have a Twitch stream up in a browser window and it detects that motion, it will not come on. Like the screensaver it will not shut the screen off. It's only if it detects like 0 motion. And so that's a little aggressive, but that's a thing that they do, I think, to help prevent burn-in. But LG, I have been a big fan of LG's TVs for a lot of years now, or at least the 2 that I have purchased from them, which is like a I think the one in the living room, the first one I got was a B6. And then this one here is a C1 that I have here. These are nice fucking TVs. And so having an LG monitor with all of the same fun features, or a lot of this, you know, having an OLED screen, having it, you know, work with G-Sync, and having it be able to hit 240 hertz. Not that most games are able to run, most modern games are not running that high, but being able to have that kind of wiggle room has been fucking rad. I think a lot of retro games weirdly benefit from HDR, which is strange, but like a lot of old games, emulated games will pop. And a lot of people are starting to use, and this is something that now that I have a RetroTink 4K on a screen that has an OLED, I'm starting to mess with a little bit more, is the idea of like, okay, a lot of times scan lines, when you're turning on fake scan lines in a thing, it darkens the image in a kind of an unnatural way, and you can use HDR to brighten that back up. And so I'm starting to find that like with that combination, there are things about fake scan lines and stuff that are starting to click for me and go like, oh, actually this does look kind of fucking rad. When you get all of this set up properly and you've got VRR, so these old games are not tearing, even though they don't run at exactly 60 hertz. With the Mister and stuff like that, where it's running these games, you know, quite accurately, that really comes in handy. And the Mister and the RetroTink work together in a really magical kind of fucking way that you wouldn't think it would need, but boy, it's cool. It's expensive, but it's fucking cool. And so, yeah, I don't know, like that stuff has been really cool. And this LG monitor has been really great. And yeah, I like it a lot. So I don't know, like, yeah, I it's hard. I'm not going to sit here and say you should definitely get this monitor, because making that recommendation would require me to know a lot more about what's coming out next and when and how much, because this stuff is always moving forward. I think LG might have a second OLED monitor out already, but I was looking at it and it didn't seem like it was dramatically different. But I don't know. I would look and see what else is coming out, and if it is massively different, if the revision on this monitor makes it any better or worse or whatever, because that's always something to consider. The newer ones are not always better with TVs anyway, especially if you're playing games on said TVs. There's always like, oh, you can't turn this off on this year's TV without going into the operator menu, and this is all fucked up. And you know, there's like people complaining about I believe the current year of LG TV in regards to I forget what it was. I saw people saying like, oh, the current LGs are not good for this, with something related to the RetroTink, if I remember correctly. So maybe it's pretty esoteric, but anyway. Justin writes in from Aberdeen, which he says is just west of Tumwater. I installed the PlayStation Remote Play app on my computer, and when looking at the settings, it said that an HEVC codec was needed to do HDR and that it was available from Microsoft. I Googled it and had to do a triple take and assumed it was a scam listing or virus app because they were charging $1. The poor Microsoft Corporation has multiple free codecs, but they're charging $1 for this? I found a way to install it using developer mode because no way in hell am I paying $1 for a codec on principle. Do you have any stories of going out of your way to do something for free on principle? Also, what the heck is a codec? Yeah, that is when Andrew Dice Clay updates his act about resolution, it's going to be him going, "What the fuck is a codec?" And it'll be great. It'll be another classic Dice bit. Do you remember back on the original Xbox, and I believe, yeah, do you remember back on the original Xbox when it would not play DVD movies unless you went out and bought their remote control with the dongle for the remote control? once you plugged in the dongle, even if you didn't use the remote control, you could play DVD movies on an Xbox. That's because they attached the licensing fees that they had to pay for the DVD playback codec to the sale of the remote. Because otherwise, every single Xbox sold, they would have to pay a fee to the DVD license holders, whether you used that Xbox for playing DVDs or not. HEVC is not a free codec. It's not an open source codec. There is some licensing organization that controls it. And as such, that licensing organization gets a taste. And so instead of attaching that fee to every single install, because every single install of, I guess, Windows 10, but probably 10 and 11, I guess, at this point. But like 10, think about it this way. Windows 10, last time I looked, and this was like 3 or 4 years ago, there was a story from like 2019 saying that there were 900 million machines running Windows 10. Now imagine that Microsoft doesn't charge for this codec. That is some fee, probably less than $1, but some fee that they would have to pay to this licensing firm for every single install of Windows. So much like the remote control back in the Xbox days, they're saying, oh, do you need it? You need to buy this, and it's $1. And there are definitely ways around it. I don't know. Does the K-Lite codec pack still get around all of this bullshit? I don't know. But yeah, there are multiple ways to get codecs onto your machine and so on and so forth. There's also an AV1 code, but AV1 I think is that one of the exciting things about AV1 is that it is, I believe, a fully open standard. And so the idea is that there are free. It's probably why YouTube uses VP9 or something. I haven't researched like which codecs are charging money and which ones are not, but stuff like this is driving people towards more open and freely available codecs because they don't want to have to deal with this licensing fee. It's also why HDMI is an extra pain in the ass, because if you want to use certain aspects of HDMI or advertise that your thing is HDMI 2.1 compliant or whatever, you need to pay the HDMI consortium some amount of money on all the cables you're selling and all this other shit too. So, the people that establish the standard in situations like this, they have to get theirs. They find a way to get theirs. And so this is Microsoft saying, okay, they have to get theirs, but also we're not going to shoulder that cost for everyone because so many people don't use this codec anyway. And so we'll just charge you $1. Yeah, it's weird, but I guess like once I understood the reasons behind it, I was kind of like, yeah, I guess I see why they would do it this way. Jacob in the UK writes in and says, I just picked up Stellar Blade, a game I hadn't heard much about, based on some reviews of the gameplay, which sounded like my kind of game. I'm having a great time, but finding the aesthetic of all the half-naked female characters to just be kind of cringy and off-putting. As sex in games has matured, with some games in recent years actually featuring sex as part of the story, like The Last of Us 2, the Wolfenstein reboot, and The Witcher, this kind of pointless titillation feels almost childish in comparison. Do you think there is a place for this kind of stuff if the space is to mature further, or do you think this is just a simple case of different strokes for different folks? Side note, when I booted the game, my wife, who rarely comments on my gaming, simply said, "What the hell are you playing?" Yes, absolutely. Like, look at, movies and music and, if this medium is to mature, it is to grow, to be able to hold all things. Like the basest, dumbest, fucking naked big boob lady. Like, sure. Why not? It is very much a case of different strokes for different folks, you know? And I don't really have a problem. Like yeah, there have definitely been some games where I've just been like, this is fucking lame. It's too much. It's stupid. But like whatever, you know? Like I think that DOA Beach Volleyball is a shitty video game. It's a fucking terrible video game. But sure, fucking whatever. Also, there are so many just straight up porn games on Steam now. And as far as I can tell, they're all pretty bad. I don't know. I can't sit here and tell you I've played a lot of them, but I have tried more than I maybe should have. And those are embarrassing to me. Those are the ones I look at and go like, ugh. Because I think about it in terms of just like, if you wanted porn, just get porn. I think that's where I come out, is when things try to just be this kind of stupid shit. It's like, you know, just go all the way with it, man. Stop fucking pussyfooting around. Like, get down to business. Go commission an artist to draw the cat girls the way you need the cat girls to be drawn. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, man, I don't know. There's nothing about Stellar Blade that I don't, and some people are mad about it because they changed some of the outfits very late in development or something. And so like, they're like, it's been censored. It's like, fucking whatever, man. But yeah, you know, like what Lollipop Chainsaw, eventually they're going to bring that thing back. And I think that's a super dumb game. But, you know, there's plenty of, you know, movies movies went through this and still do sometimes. Your B movies, your C movies and whatever. I think that's a staple in a lot of ways. This kind of sexploitation kind of fucking weird shit that has been done, and some of that stuff is, you know, it doesn't age well all the time, but like fucking whatever, man. I guess to my point here, and I think because the way that all of this stuff used to be talked about, a lot of the arguments came from a very like male oriented perspective, where you had a lot of men saying this is demeaning and this is the, you know, and like over the years I have met a lot of women that have liked games that I've heard men passionately argue about, like, no, this is demeaning, and then like, you know, like women being like, no, actually I think Bayonetta is fucking awesome. I think Bayonetta is super sexy and that's great, and whatever else, and it's totally normal and fucking whatever. And like do these things, you know, it's a very complicated conversation, right? Because I think, you know, everyone is going to have a slightly different take on it, because sexuality is a very personal thing. You know, like, what do you find hot about this or that? And, you know, like the armor conversation that comes up a lot about like, oh, these women aren't wearing realistic armor. It's like, yeah, I don't know, man. Did you ever fucking watch Conan? Like, yeah, like that's, yes, that's why they're doing it. Is that good? Maybe like not, probably not in some ways. Like, yeah, you're certainly creating a situation where you're setting up the male gaze to look at a very specific part, and, you know, hey, but I you know, I just, over the years, I think enough women have felt more comfortable speaking up on a lot of that stuff and saying like, actually, fucking, I think that stuff's hot too. It's where, you know, it's just not a very simple conversation. The way some people tried to make it. And so that's kind of one of the saddest and weirdest things about some of the Stellar Blade conversation, is it felt like a lot of people, there were two sides to this issue. There were people who were like, I can't believe that they're covering up the Stellar Blade lady. And then a bunch of other people going like, what? The woke made them cover up the ladies, and like no one is calling for, you know, like the reviews are generally positive. People are like, oh yeah, it's pretty. I don't know. The ladies look good. The ladies look good. it's not some big, like people are trying to treat it like it's some massive, like middle of the culture war thing. But that's because I think a lot of the people that are wrapped up in that viewpoint have to keep the anger and the grift going to, to make money on it, to keep getting, I don't know, YouTube views or Twitter or whatever's or whatever the fuck they're in it for. I don't know. But I think I can say with some confidence that half-naked ladies are here to stay. It's American society. Though sometimes it seems like some people are trying to legislate that out of existence. And the number of people that are trying to legislate sexuality, I think is disgusting and haunting and ghoulish. And sometimes it seems like the people that fucking yell the loudest about, I can't believe they're taking away our half-naked ladies, blah, 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 are also the sort of people that would vote for the people that are trying to pass that legislation to make it even more puritanical and fucked up in this country. And so I just, these people are fucking idiots. Like, they are unserious people. That's why, there's not like a great debate on it, because when you go and look at what these people are getting mad about, you're like, okay, you people are fucking morons. Like, you are stupid idiots. So go be stupid idiots somewhere else. But I think, you talk about maturity in games. I think true maturity in games is like, yeah, man, this stuff exists. And you have to have a level of maturity and a level of discernment in your own, media preferences or whatever, to decide what you want to see and what you don't want to see. But, no one's like, I can't think of a time when people have been like, this shouldn't be allowed to exist. Like, no one said that about, like, even that last DOA volleyball game, or DOA X or whatever it is. Like, they decided not to sell it in the US on Steam or on any platform, I guess. It was only available in Japan. No one here was calling for Team Ninja's head and going like, you better not sell that here. Like, there were some people that were like, look at this fucking weird shit. But no one was seriously talking about trying to fucking ban the video game. Like, it's just, yeah, I don't know, man. Like, it's never been a serious conversation. The last time there was any kind of serious conversation about any kind of video game ban type stuff, it was when you had assholes like Jack Thompson in the mix, having very disingenuous conversations about violence in video games, and also the sex as a part of that, with your hot coffees and whatnot. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, yeah, well, you fucking, somewhere Tipper Gore is out there mad about 2 Live Crew songs still, or whatever, these people are pathetic. Let's see. My wife likes Bayonetta way more than I ever did. My wife likes the newer, modern Leisure Suit Larry games. Like, really? Okay. Vaughn writes in and says, there's been a few people kicking off on Twitter. Is that what we're calling it now? About preview footage of a new Hunter x Hunter fighting game reusing animations from Marvel vs. Capcom 3 as it is being made by the same developer. Why do you think so many people seem to get mad at animations or assets from one game being used in another? I've never been able to understand the thinking that every part of a new game needs to be completely bespoke. Surely this thinking would just push development costs even higher to unsustainable levels. For some reason, the one series I've never seen this reaction with is Yakuza, which reuses the same location, at least in part, in basically every game in the franchise. Yeah, Vaughn. I agree with you. Like, I think a lot of it stems from is anyone actually mad about this? I guess, like, that's the question I have to ask, because I have not seen this. I didn't even know, I did not even know there was a new Hunter x Hunter game being made. But this, this seems like if people are digging this up and trying to make these comparisons, it's the same people. Like it's the same people that are trying to force the like lazy game devs narrative or something, right? And I don't know. I think that there's probably a line, right? There's probably a line, and past which, if you've reused more than this percentage of animations to where it's very noticeable across the board, it starts to feel a little cheap. And I get that, like, there are people out there that think that games are very expensive. And so when they see any corners being cut, or by their perception, corners being cut by game developers, they're like, no, why would we do this again? This is already tried and tested and true, and we know that this works, and this, saves us a little bit of time that we can then spend polishing up some other aspect of the game or whatever. I don't necessarily see that as a problem. If you had an entire game that was all reused animations and it was very obvious across the board, then that's probably over the line. And you go like, yeah, this is a ripoff. This is a reskin of this. This is this doesn't feel like a new product anymore. And I think that's, that's probably fair criticism over a certain line. But if we're talking about a handful of moves here and there, or yeah, I mean, the Yakuza conversation I think is even weirder, right? Because yeah, Yakuza reuses part of the same location in a lot of its games, but like they do that for story reasons. Like there's a great, that's where the game is set. That's where the area is. That's what the area looks like. To change it would be to change a character in that game because the locale is part of that. That said, like there are definitely times where I like new things. I like new things in games. And so when you have situations where you've recreated the exact same area and whatever else like that, I get why people would feel at least slightly like, I wish, I'm doing this again. I want to feel it. I want to feel something new, But it's a weird line. It's a blurry line, I think. I went through this in some ways, but not in a. It's something that I've come to appreciate in a way that now it would feel weird if it didn't have it. But the thing I always think about when it comes to this is the animation in Tekken when you lose and the guy arches his back up and goes, ah! That just became hilarious to me at some point, to where now if a Tekken game didn't have it, I would miss it. But yeah, Spider-Man protects New York. And so are you going to remake New York every time you make a Spider-Man game? Yes, provided that the technology has changed to where you can make a higher fidelity New York than you could before. Sure. But in the context of like, here's another PS5 game set in the same city, and hey, we've got some new parts of it that you didn't go to before, so it's not fully new, do you even notice? Like, I don't know. Like I when playing Spider-Man 2, I didn't necessarily feel like, it just felt like another open world city. It didn't necessarily feel like the exact same open world city from Spider-Man 1. Maybe if I had like lived in Spider-Man 1 for another 100 hours or so, I would feel differently. But like, for me, it's elements like the HUD and upgrades and stuff like that you kind of see all over a game when that stuff doesn't change much from year to year. That's usually the stuff that sticks out at me a little bit because it's a little more all over the game than like an individual animation or just a part of a city or whatever else. But I don't know. I'm a little torn on it because I think that at the end of the day, like I prefer when things in games are new, but also there are plenty of things in games that are not new that I may never notice. that they've reused from a sequel or reused from some other game that they made. I think animations from MVC3 being used in a... If anything, I wonder if that's something that is making MVC3 fans excited about this Hunter x Hunter game. Jake from Texas writes in. A new character for the new Fatal Fury game was revealed this past weekend at EVO Japan. It looked great, so I figured I'd brush up on SNK since they're my only real gap in knowledge when it comes to the history of fighting games. I had to stop and think for a minute. I was like, wait, there's new Fatal Fury? I was like, oh, you mean Mark of the Wolves. Okay, yes. Yes, there's City of the Wolves. Yes, okay. I guess that's yes, that is a Fatal Fury game. Marco Rodriguez was announced. Not Kushanud, but I haven't been this mad since Windjammers got rid of fucking... Oh, man. But even with the internet, it's so hard to keep track of. There's not only 15 King of Fighters games, but also 9 Fatal Fury games. And most crazy of all is that the first Fatal Fury game's full title is Fatal Fury King of Fighters. Apparently SNK was doing Smash Brothers style crossovers all the way back in the 90s? Yes. Yes, they were, yes. So I guess my questions are these. 1, what was it like seeing a publisher do all of this brand synergy through a metric ton of releases back then? And 2, what do you think of SNK fighting games in general? So 1, yeah, so there were a handful of SNK fighting games that I feel like had limited penetration into the US fighting game market. Fatal Fury was pretty cool. I always thought Art of Fighting was no good because they limited how many fireballs you could throw. You had World Heroes, which I thought was rad. You had Samurai Showdown, which is still probably the best of them all and is, never really fully represented in King of Fighters the way you want. You even have Last Blade and some of the, Waku Waku 7 and, those are not made by SNK, but they're, well, Waku Waku 7 wasn't. But anyway. Early days of SNK, early days of the Neo Geo. Yeah, you had a bunch of these nondescript fighting games, and you were just like, what the fuck? There's like 5 fighting games I've never heard of on this one cabinet alone. What the fuck am I looking at here? Art of Fighting, Fatal Fury, World Heroes, like Aggressors of Dark Combat, which is a weird nonsense thing. And so, I don't know, like Fatal Fury 2 was cool, and, Fatal Fury 3 was good as well. But, like, it never really felt like those games really mattered. It's because Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat had become such juggernauts here in the States. Like, the SNK stuff, the only thing that stuck out was Samurai Showdown because it had fucking swords. And so when they first started putting out King of Fighters, it was actually kind of cool because it felt more different than the individual games. Because when KOF first came out, you picked a team. You picked a team of 3 characters. And they were preset teams until you got the home version. Then you could do team edit and whatever else. But and then that changed eventually. That they let you kind of pick whoever all the time. But like originally, you were like, okay, well, I really like Terry Bogard, but I really don't like Andy Bogard. So this team is fucking rough for me, man. And then, yeah, it was just that first KOF that had the team select stuff. But at the time, like, in some ways, I think that the coolest thing about King of Fighters is that it normalized all of those Art of Fighting guys. It got rid of some of the systems of some of those games and kind of mashed them all into a maybe slightly more generic system at the time, or just a generic variant of the Fatal Fury stuff in some ways. And I think made it made all of those characters much more playable than they were sometimes in their own games. And then, of course, as they expanded, they started looking at more and weirder parts of the SNK universe to pull in more and more characters. By the time we get to KOF 2000, you get to like K-Dash and some of these other, like the King of Fighters story itself, the fucking Orochi saga and the nests and all this other, like the lore of King of Fighters is fucking bonkers. And the characters that they're able to bring into that franchise around that time made it even weirder, added like a whole, a bunch of additional characters to it that were original to that game. And so at some point, King of Fighters just usurped everything else. They didn't need to make more Art of Fighting games because they had this. They didn't need to go make more Fatal Fury games on a regular basis because they had this. But they did make Mark of the Wolves. And Mark of the Wolves is an amazing, tight fighting game with a more limited roster than certainly any of the King of Fighters games would have had around that era. It looks great. It plays incredibly well. And then they didn't do anything with it. It's like it's technically a Fatal Fury game, but no one ever really thought about it that way. There was always just because it was this kind of an advanced timeline. At some point, Terry lost his hat and bought a jacket. It's murky, man. And so Mark of the Wolves always just felt like this lone thing that they did on a lark. And then you heard that they attempted a sequel, but the hardware and the company went into bankruptcy. And so like that stuff just kind of never happened. But it was their opportunity to kind of like reset Fatal Fury, because they kept making Samurai Showdown games and you'd still occasionally get a World Heroes game for a little while. But like Art of Fighting kind of went away, and the Fatal Fury trilogy there went away. You had the Real Bout Fatal Fury games, which I thought were pretty awesome too, and those feel like a separate kind of sub-genre of Fatal Fury game as well. But yeah, they consolidated most of their efforts into King of Fighters, and I still think KOF 98 is well, it's my favorite. It's my favorite. It's a really big roster of really good characters. It feels like the kind of the stuff past that, they get into kind of different characters and more characters make their debuts in like 99 and 2000. And then past 2000, I don't really pay nearly as much attention to it anymore. But yeah, I don't know. That stuff was always kind of cool. And now they're making City of the Wolves. Now they're making a follow-up to Mark of the Wolves. And so it's really weird after all these years that they're doing it. I think it looks really nice. There's a part of me that will always wish that it was a 2D game. I would love to see a modern 2D game. Like truly sprite based, like, not, like a truly old school, new, whatever you want to call it. But I do think the art style they're going with in City of the Wolves, I think it looks really nice. I think the trailer with Butt in it looks good. I kind of skimmed through the trailer a little bit, so I didn't see if he had his board. I hope he fucking pulls out his board and fucking plants it down when he wins. Otherwise, what are we doing? It has. I'm sure it's there. Why wouldn't it be? But the follow-up question here: what do you think of SNK fighting games in general? I really like a handful of them, and I wish that I had more time to play them with other people. That was something back in the GameSpot offices when Mark of the Wolves came out. We ended up playing quite a bit of it. It's why I felt like I need to buy this. And when I was in Japan, I spent $1,100 or whatever it was on a cartridge. That and Samurai Showdown 2 and King of Fighters 98 are probably the games I spent the most time with. Samurai Showdown 2 was a very popular one at the local movie theater with the people who worked there, and they got way into it, even though none of them were especially into fighting games or just games in general. Everyone played a little bit of Samurai Showdown 2, and that was a lot of fun. It's fun when you've got just like a competitive kind of local group of people, you know, and that's what I remember about the SNK fighting games, is that they were really good in that type of environment. Over the years, you know, I don't know, SNK is such a weird, sketchy company now anyway, but you know, the 3D stuff doesn't really, you know, every time they put out a new King of Fighters, I mess with it for a little bit and go like, yeah, this seems neat, but I never spend any real time with it. It ends up just being such a large roster and such a, you know, like I look at it and go like, you know, I like Terry Bogard really, but what I really want is CVS 3. If I want Terry Bogard in a game, I want either CVS 3 or a Mark of the Wolves sequel. So it's interesting that they're finally making a Mark of the Wolves sequel, and we'll kind of see what that ends up looking like when they're done with it. They did announce that's coming out early next year, I guess. Yes, the ownership of SNK is a sketchy, fucking unfortunate thing. You thought it was bad when they were owned by pachinko companies, and then now you're like, oh, well, now it's owned by Saudi Arabia. I'm like, fuck. At least the pachinko parlors, you know, you would win and get some groceries. Grant writes in and says, what's the best PlayStation? He says, the PlayStation always felt underpowered to me, seeing what Nintendo was doing. I ignored PS1. The PS2 again just felt underpowered, so I completely ignored it for the Xbox and then PC. The PS3 was an utter disaster, and my 360 red-ringed during Gears of War, so I went PC only during that generation. And the PS5 just sums up the generation. Lackluster. I am that bored of the consoles that the last game I played on my PS5 was in 2021. The PS4, however, was just perfect. It had amazing games and no flaws. It could do everything well, and I think it's the first time Sony really nailed everything. I was wondering what your favorite PlayStation is. I think you are crazy. No, I don't know. The PS4 is it was a heck of a console, for sure. The CPU on that thing was pretty underpowered, and it felt like that we were seeing that a lot sooner over the course of a generation than you did in some of the previous ones. I think the PlayStation and the PS2 are pretty unbeatable. Like, are they underpowered? I don't think I would call them underpowered. I think I would call them not the most powerful consoles of their generation. But I think that the caveats that you have to go into to enjoy the N64 are so severe, with it being cartridges and the extra layer of fog and how blurry everything always was. Like, I fucking, with the exception of the first party games of note, I think the N64 is garbage. I think it's just those games look ugly. They look like absolute shit. They did then. They still do. It's gross. It's a gross system with a fucking insane person's controller that is great for those two games. It's great for the two N64 games that matter. And everything else, fucking whatever, man. And I felt that then. The PlayStation 1 was a worldwide success, and a lot of games came out on it from a lot of different territories, and they were, you know, easy to get your hands on and import games and buy US games, and there were so many games made for it that, yeah, okay, the polygons wiggled and jiggled and fucking looked insane at times, and there were aspects of the PlayStation 1 that looked gross in their own special way. But I would take that type of gross over the N64 type of gross 10 times out of 10. And the Saturn isn't even in the conversation, which is, I like the Saturn. Now that we can reflect on the Saturn and its worldwide library all these years later, I think it is easy to find some great respect for the Saturn. But at the time, it was like, hey, this game's coming out on PlayStation and Saturn, and the Saturn version runs like shit. And you're like, great, awesome. That's sweet. I played a lot of Street Fighter the movie on Saturn. And saying that the PS2 felt underpowered, I think it's again a situation where, yes, Xbox games technically were capable of looking better. But most developers didn't take full advantage of the PlayStation, of the Xbox hardware either. And so it was a situation where a lot of third-party Xbox games only looked slightly better than their PS2 counterparts, but not as good as the exclusive games on the Xbox. And so, again, the PlayStation 2, from a software support standpoint, I think is damn near unbeatable. It is in the conversation for one of the greatest platforms of all time, along with the SNES and the Xbox 360. Grant, you say that the PS3 was an utter disaster. I'm not that far off from that. But it's from a system services standpoint and the clunky nature of the PS3 and the way the PS3 operated. And it's going to throw up this full screen. It's going to beep at you and throw up a full screen thing that says, when it's saving, don't turn it off. Like, yeah, no, I get it. A lot of the online features that we think of as being standard in that generation were only standard originally on the Xbox 360 and added later to the PS3. They patched a lot of that stuff in. And I think some of that showed. You had cases where some developers were not amazing at getting Unreal Engine games to work well on PlayStation hardware, and so you would have situations where the 360 would run those games better. The software support story started to change in that generation, where more developers started thinking worldwide, and so the import scene was a little less interesting. Not to say it was uninteresting, you had your Tokyo jungles and whatnot, but not as exciting as it was in the PS2 era. And then there was the controller. Yeah, I don't know. The PS3 controller at launch before they put Rumble in it felt like this lightweight piece of garbage that was going to crumble in your hands. I always felt like I was just going to smash the whole thing. It was like an egg carton or something. Just because those initial controllers were so light and not in a good way. They felt flimsy. The analog triggers were shit, such that when games like Call of Duty started using the L2 and R2 triggers on Xbox, they would use L1 and R1 on the PS3 because the squishy garbage triggers on the PS3 were no good. So shooters would swap their shoulder buttons between platforms because no one wanted to pull fucking R2 and L2 on a PlayStation controller because it felt so fucking gross. So yeah, I don't know. The PS3, I think when you look at it in retrospect now, it doesn't seem nearly as crazy as it did then. I think in a lot of ways, the PS3 just always felt off to me. Especially with how ascendant the Xbox 3 and how forward-thinking the Xbox 360 really seemed. We'll take a couple more questions here. Randy in Madawaska, Maine says, this is something that's been bugging me for like 30 years, and I need your deep industry expertise to shed some light on this bizarre mystery. What the fuck was up with the 32X? What a weird thing, right? Weird. Yes, Randy. Glenn and I covered this in an episode of Game Boys to Men, which you can get access to over at patreon.com/Jeff Gerstmann. If you want a kind of a deeper dive on Sega through that era. But I'll say yes, the 32X was in retrospect is very easy to call the 32X bad. At the time, like, it almost seemed kind of cool because you didn't know the Saturn was necessarily right around the corner. You didn't know that the 32X was not going to have any real software support. Instead, you just saw, like, this thing runs Star Wars Arcade, this polygonal game. Like, it runs it pretty well. That's kind of fucking awesome. Like, oh, it's got, yeah, it's got some games. Like the early days of the 32X, you're like, yeah, it's kind of, there's maybe something about this. As someone who was like a longtime Genesis fan, you didn't necessarily realize that the wheels were coming off when that thing first got announced. It took about 6 months or so before you realized, like, oh, like, no more games are coming out. Like, it feels like there's barely anything coming out for this thing. It is a weird thing to hook up, like all the pass-through video cables and all the insane things you need to do, especially if you have a Sega CD hooked up as well. It was just a strange thing that at its best you looked at and went like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess it's kind of like a SNES now. Like, it can kind of do the Star Fox thing, and yeah, kind of maybe a little scaling and rotation. It's like I paid $200 to put Mode 7 into a Genesis, and the colors pop a little better. Like, the colors are a little better. But like, the 32X was doomed from the get-go because the Saturn was right around the corner, and like the internal struggles between Sega in Japan and Sega of America, and just all of the stuff happening around that. When you really peel back the layers and get at the actual story of what was happening at Sega, the 32X never had a chance. And it never really deserved. It's not like if the Saturn had not come out that the 32X would have flourished. It was always kind of a weird thing anyway. But why would you make a 32X game? How many do they sell? Why would you spend a lot of time on a 32X port of a game? Because people had to, especially the developers, that some of them made Sega CD games that also used the 32X. And so you needed to have the full stack to play this game. Like, what's the install base of that actual stack? And is that worth it? When instead you could just be making regular ass Genesis games, and however many more millions of people could just play those. So yeah, it just kind of never, ultimately it just kind of never really had a shot, and it's easy to see why now it never had that shot. But yeah. I think that's going to do it for us here today. You know what? There's some new emails just came in. Let me just look and see. Nigel in the UK writes in and says, listening to gaming podcasts, one can get the impression that the only games that kids play these days are Minecraft, Fortnite, and Roblox. Are they just the modern equivalent of MSN Messenger, a place to hang out and chat with friends? And said players do in fact know what Mario 64 is and go on to play Baldur's Gate 3 or Spider-Man 2 or whatever? How has the development of a player changed, if at all, over the years? Yeah, I mean, yes. Like, do players graduate? That is the big question. I think that the industry hasn't necessarily answered yet because, there's probably not enough of a sample size yet, but we're getting there. Like, yes, do players graduate from Minecraft, Fortnite, and Roblox into quote unquote real games, which is a shitty way of putting it, but you know what I mean. I think some do, some don't. I think that you will have plenty of people that will play these 3 games because that tons of their friends are playing those games, or, throw Rocket League in there. Sure. Why not? Because those are mega popular games and all of their friends are talking about them and whatever else. And then some decide that they don't actually like games, and maybe they stop playing them, or maybe they still just play those games because of the social aspects of it, for the same reason that, some people played WoW for fucking 20 years. The social aspects of it, or whatever. If they've got a friend group and that's what their friend group plays, they're going to play that. But maybe they just stop playing games, Maybe it's just like, okay, yeah, I played Minecraft for 6 years and then I was good. And then instead I got into playing soccer or whatever the fuck it is. Instead I got into fentanyl, whatever it is the kids are getting into these days. But yeah, I think that's it's kind of the question, right? And what sorts of games might those players be looking for, or whatever? Are you going to go buy them a $250 copy of Escape from Tarkov and so that they can just be mad online all the time? I don't know. Ultimately, I don't think that the industry necessarily knows, and I don't think that they have a path per se to move from those games into, what are they gonna, if those are the games they're playing, Minecraft, Fortnite, and Roblox, those are all incredibly social games. They're not necessarily games with prominent storylines. Why would players graduate from that and then go like, I'm looking for a game with a story and I'm looking for single player experiences, and maybe they will, maybe they won't, but everyone's going to be a little different. But I don't know, maybe they get into Warzone and that gets them into Call of Duty. Maybe. I don't really know. But games like Call of Duty and Halo and some of those shooters a generation or two ago maybe would have occupied that space of just like, here's the big mainstream games that, people of all ages and a lot of kids play. My daughter and my son spent a day or two playing a Peppa Pig game and then never asked about it ever again. So that's a bummer because I had to buy it on Switch. It was on the PlayStation Plus stuff, so we were able to play that version. So my daughter was playing that, and then my son wanted to keep stealing the controller from her, and I was like, well, I just want peace. So I bought it on the Switch so that my son could play it on the Switch, and he's 2, and he was able to walk around and hit the button. Like, they do a good job of making that game so dumb that all you do is walk around and hit the damn button, and then things happen. It's like a Flash game practically. But apparently not enough to keep them engaged for any real length of time. Anyway, that's going to do it for the program. Thanks everybody for writing in. Again, podcast@guard.bike is the email address. Keep those emails coming in. What else is going on? If you want to see me playing some Gamedle, that video is up on YouTube now. Gamedle is like Wordle, but with video games, but also not really like Wordle. It just runs in a browser. But it's a game with a handful of different modes where you're either identifying a game based on a blurry version of its box art, or the actual mode that is cool is one that breaks it down into its genres and platforms and year of release and all this other stuff, and you're guessing game names and narrowing it down. Like, okay, so now we know the game you're looking for came out between 2008 and 2014, and it's a single player only game, and it's first person, and it's this, and more like a GeoGuessr, but for games, I guess is maybe another way to put that. It's neat. I played it for an hour and change the other day. That video's up on YouTube. You should go give that a look. What else is going on? We'll rank some more 8-bit Nintendo games on Friday. I'll be back on Wednesday to do something. I might be a little late because with the kids being sick and stuff, there's a lot of shuffling happening and whatever else. But like that's, you know, we'll, might start a little late depending on how that all goes. And I don't know what we'll look at then. Maybe we'll play some mini shoot adventures since I talked about that today. And that game is awesome. So, yeah, maybe we'll check that out. There's a few other things that I have installed that I've been meaning to get to for a little bit. So maybe we'll get to some of those. In the meantime, hang loose, I guess. I don't know. Does that Shaka? No? All right. No Shaka. Have a good week, everybody. Be back next Tuesday for another edition of the podcast. See you then. Bye.